All right, welcome. It looks like pretty much all the folks who were in the waiting room have joined this meeting now. Thanks for coming to the real workshop part of the demographic workshop. I'm Kevin from SCAG. I'll just be helping to facilitate a little bit alongside with my colleague Edward here. Looks like we've got about 70 participants here for what is always a good roundtable at the demographic workshop, the HCD roundtable. HCD has been involved as long as I can remember in this event. So it's great to have the state agency participation in our regional events, facilitated even more so now through the online format. So Sohab Mehmood is going to be presenting housing planning for the future. Sohab is a housing policy specialist in the land use and planning unit, part of the definitely growing staff, I think, right, at the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. Sohab specializes in housing elements and is the team lead on the technical assistance program serving SB2 planning grants, LEAP, local early application program, and REAP, regional early application program planning grants as well. So a lot of things that you may have heard kind of in the housing communities around here, since that's been a big priority for regional planning, certainly for some time. So Sohab's got a presentation, but just so that everyone knows some of the logistics here, I think on the next slide, this is just a regular Zoom meeting. It's not the Zoom webinar, so you can unmute yourself just by pressing the little button or pressing *9 if you're on the phone, or you can raise your hand on the Zoom device in the participants side here. But obviously, because we do have a big group, we didn't know exactly how big the groups would necessarily be. I'll just kind of help Sohab facilitate and call on folks. So make sure to use the little hand raise function or put stuff in the chat once we get to the more open discussion portion. So without further ado, Sohab.
Great, thank you so much, Kevin. I am just going to share my screen really quick. Pull up my presentation. Kevin, I am going to point to you always to let me know if you can see something or it's nothing showing up. So, can you see that?
Not yet.
Oh, okay, hold on. Oh, I didn't press the share button. You would think I would have got the hang of this thing. How about now? Can you see a presentation?
There we go.
Perfect. Okay, great. Okay, so like Kevin mentioned, my name is Sohab Mehmood. I'm with the California Department of Housing and Community Development, also known as HCD. I'm within the Housing Policy Division, and within the Housing Policy Division, I work in the Land Use and Planning Unit. As Kevin mentioned, I'm the lead for a technical assistance program that really it's a catch-all for accelerating housing production, but under that TA program includes LEAP, REAP, Prohousing, SB2, and probably a lot of other topic areas. My role really is to help facilitate and find and deploy resources to all the regions on TA services around these kind of project areas. I also work on housing elements as well. So a little bit about me. So I am going to start actually with a poll just to see kind of everyone's familiarity with some of the programs that I'm going to mention in the presentation. Edward, could you help me with there we go. So if you can, just take a quick second, super easy questions. Are you familiar with the SB2 Planning Grants program? It's okay if you're not. I will be surprised though, but it's okay. Hopefully I can get you up to speed. Okay, looks like some people are still pulling a little bit. Okay, some people are still voting. Okay, so about 82% who voted. looks like we still have about 33 participants who are not familiar. Hopefully I can kind of give you a little bit of information on that program. It was unrolled last year, but we can hopefully get you up to speed. It's a pretty simple program. Edward, can you go to the next question, please? Okay, and then are you familiar with the Local Early Action Planning Grants Program, the LEAP program? Not the REAP, similar, they rhyme, but it's the LEAP one. Just give a few seconds. Okay. Okay, so looks about like half of the people in the room. So we will also educate everyone on that program. Luckily, that program is still running right now, so hopefully this will be happy news or good news for some people who are not familiar with the LEAP program. Okay, those are the only polling questions I have. Edward, thank you so much for facilitating that. Okay, so let me go. Next slide. So for the agenda today, I'm going to talk about the Planning Grants program. Planning Grants was a program, well, there's several programs, but Planning Grants was something that the state rolled out last year, and we had the SB2 Planning Grants program as well as the LEAP Planning Grants program. I'm going to go over just kind of how did it go and where we are right now with these programs. Then I'm going to do a quick overview as well of the Prohousing and REAP programs. These are two programs that were kind of rolled out this year through the Budget Act of 2019, and I'll kind of give you a high-level overview of what that is. Then I'm going to go into hopefully in quite a bit of detail on our technical assistance program. I'll go over what the program actually is, how it can help all of you, why it matters, our strategy on deploying TA resources to all of you, and the tools and resources we have available right now, and also what's coming your way. So, to go ahead and kind of give a quick overview on what's happened, oops, see, always do something like that, and what's happened in the last couple of years. So in 2017, we had the 2017 housing package, as you can see right here. It was the legislative housing package, and it was considered one of the most monumental housing packages for a while. And as a result of that housing package, we got Senate Bill 2, also known as SB2, which created the state's first permanent funding source for affordable housing. But within SB2, what happened with the legislation is that the first year of revenues for the SB2 funding source, 50% went to developing a planning grant program. It's also known as SB2 PGP, SB2 planning grants, kind of, you can mess around with those acronyms a little bit, but the program was meant to help cities and counties plan for housing and help them set the regulatory framework for housing to occur in their community. So again, this was implemented in, as you can see, 2018, 2019. And within this SB2 Planning Grants program, as we implemented it, we received grant applications from almost 491 cities and counties in California. There's about somewhere around 534, I believe. So it's, or 539. So it's close to 90% of the state applied for these planning grants. So that's a huge success. We're very pleased. I think the whole state should be really pleased, and I kind of even have a breakdown of per region, how each region did as far as applying. So general overview of what applicants applied for. It was a variety of activities, but it included rezoning land for by right development at higher densities possibly, developing standards and programs that encourage ADUs, such as prototype plans, implementing process improvements like purchasing permit tracking systems to expedite the processing of building permits and permit applications, and a lot more activities, housing element updates, general plan updates, comprehensive zoning code updates, wide range of activities. And I will have a tool that I'm going to share with all of you so you can kind of see the long list of activities and even who applied for what. So now moving into 2019, 2020, we got a new governor who made housing a top priority. He came in with 2019-2020 Budget Act, which included a combination of funding, incentives, and accountability measures for local governments around housing. So one of these funding programs in this 2019-2020 Budget Act included the Early Action Planning Grants. And then if you put L, you got LEAP, and if you put R, you'll get REAP. But the Early Action Planning Grants covers both programs, and it allocated $250 million to local governments and regional governments to accelerate housing production and plan for their six-cycle RHNA. As you can see, concurrently with many of these funding programs and these incentives that are coming out, the six-cycle RHNA is unfolding, and for a lot of jurisdictions, it could also mean that their RHNA is increasing. So with these funding incentives, or with this increase in RHNA, we also were able to pair some funding sources to help you with accommodating that increase in RHNA numbers. So also, in February 2020, we released the NOFA for the LEAP program, Local Early Action Planning Grants. That program is the allocation that goes directly to cities and counties, like SB2 planning grants, to update your planning documents and implement process improvements that help you meet your RHNA and accelerate housing production. So again, we released that NOFA in February 2020. We also released the NOFA for REAP. That is the regional allocation for planning grants. That goes to mainly COGs and regional entities to also help facilitate local government in meeting their RHNA goals. And then in summer 2020, something we're working on right now is the pro-housing regulations. So the pro-housing regulations also, I will go into detail about all of these programs in my presentation, but as part of an incentive of the Budget Act, they developed a pro-housing program. This is a process, where cities and counties can get awarded for implementing pro-housing policies. These are basically certain policies that help with housing production. It could be something around expedited processing, around zoning, around financial incentives, ADUs, long list. But basically, these pro-housing policies help you gain that designation, and then you become more competitive for other competitive funding programs, like IIG, so it's an Infill Infrastructure Grant Program, AHSC, TCC. So right now, we're working on the process of having the emergency regulations for that pro-housing program. Those regulations will kind of let you know what policies are included as pro-housing and how you can gain that designation for your city or county. So, like I said, I'm going to do an overview of the planning grants. I call them the planning grants, there's a couple pieces to it, but overall, it's the planning grants that were kind of unrolled in the last year and a half. So in 2019, like I mentioned, we had the SB2 planning grants. That was a $123 million pot of money that was going directly to cities and counties. The application period closed in December of last year. We received 491 applications, most of them on the day they were due, but that's okay. But nonetheless, we received applications from 90% of the state. Now, in 2020, we have the LEAP grant program, so that's the Local Early Action Planning Grant programs. That goes directly to cities and counties like SB2 to help you update your planning documents and process improvements and implement strategies to accelerate housing production around the realms of housing planning. Also, and that is due by July 1st. I will kind of also go over that deadline and the resources to meet that deadline because I know that's coming up in the next 2 weeks. Also, we have the Regional Early Action Planning Grant Program. Again, that's known as REAP. Mayanne from SCAG is here to answer any questions if you might have about that, but that is basically a grant program directly to COGs and regional entities on helping with planning for the sixth cycle and creating regional strategies to address housing. So the SB2 Planning Grants Program, I keep saying we had 400, oh, it says 494 applications. I think that's a huge success because it's very hard for smaller cities, rural cities, even larger cities to access grant funding programs. So we wanted to make sure when we developed the SB2 planning grants, we made sure it's a program that's easily accessible to all cities and counties. So you can get the funding you need to kind of help accelerate housing production in your community. The grant amounts, they ranged from $160,000 to $625,000. They were based on population categories. Just to show you kind of what was the statistics per region, this is basically based on the applications. This is how much funding for each region they were able to get, and then how much some people left on the table. So for the greater Sacramento region, all jurisdictions within that region applied, so they had a 100% funding rate, which meant they got 100% of that funding cumulatively for their entire region. For LA County, 91.9%, again, very good. I mean, across the board, still really high rates for any grant program. And we want to do the same with LEAP. So the Local Early Action Planning Grants, LEAP, I've mentioned that quite a few times now. What is this program? So again, as part of the Budget Act, the funding for local governments was known as LEAP. It's a program for cities and counties to apply for. Again, HCD just released its NOFA. Well, they released it in February, and the deadline is July 1st. It's a non-competitive program, meaning you're not competing with anyone. It's almost like your allocation is just kind of waiting for you as long as you have an eligible project. It's an over-the-counter process. Number one, non-competitive. Don't have to compete. Second of all, it's over the counter. That means that once you submit your application, if there are any deficiencies or if there are any issues, we're going to follow up with you. And basically with the over the counter process, we're hoping that we're not planning on denying any applications. We're trying to use that process to get your application to a point of approval so we can get you your funding. All cities and counties are eligible to apply for this funding. There are no threshold requirements. The only thing you need is an eligible project that can help accelerate housing production. If you're familiar with SB2 Planning Grants Program, you did need a compliant housing element, and you also needed your APR submitted. Not with this program. Again, all you need is that eligible project. So the grant funding is intended to help local governments prepare and adopt any type of planning documents that accelerate housing production and can implement and facilitate compliance with the six-cycle RHNA. So examples of eligible activities, there's a long list, by the way. You can find it in the NOFA. The NOFA is not even comprehensive of the long list. I think we have a catch-all word, which is planning documents that accelerate housing production. But just an example, rezoning, environmental clearances, infrastructure planning, infrastructure analysis, ADU ordinances, ADU prototype plans, comprehensive ADU programs that include prototype plans, ADU ordinance, maybe a process to process ADU applications, six-cycle housing elements. As I've been doing TA, that's one of the most common questions we're getting is, can you use the grant funding to update your six-cycle housing element? Yes, you can. Establishing pro-housing policies. So like I mentioned, that Prohousing Program, if you want to establish the policies that can gain you that kind of that designation, that label saying that you're pro-housing friendly, you can use this funding to establish those policies. And again, many more activities. There's probably a long list. It's very much similar to the SB2 Planning Grants Program. Other activities that I've been hearing as I've been doing outreach, people updating different parts of their general plan to be consistent. So safety element, environmental justice, hazard mitigation, conservation element, any plan, any project that you can draw a nexus towards production, where you can say, for my community, this is going to make a difference in impacting housing production. And I feel like this is a role, this document, this planning document has a role to play when it comes to speeding up the process to have housing in my community. So what do you do with LEAP? What are the next steps? Contact your TA regional liaison. Our LEAP program, just like SB2 if you're familiar, has an in-house TA program. We have about 15 staff members who have been assigned 15 different regions or subregions in California. That person is your point of contact for any questions you might have, you have some clarifying questions, you have some ideas you're now probably thinking about, you want to run it by them. Maybe you have a draft application already drafted, but if you're unsure if you've hit all the key points, and you want them to review your draft application. They can help you with a wide range of questions and issues you might be running into. I will give you a flyer. I can also share it after this panel about who your regional representative is going to be. That is, again, your point of contact to help you with all of your TA needs for applying to LEAP. Also, start brainstorming. If you just heard about this program and you're like, I got 2 weeks, start brainstorming what those projects look like. And then again, contact your regional liaison so you can get help with drafting your application as soon as possible. Submit any of your questions to the early action planning at hcd.ca.gov or again to your TA regional liaison. And definitely want to apply by July 1st. So for the LEAP TA program, I'm assuming most of you guys are around the Southern California, but maybe even the LA County area. So for your TA people, it's going to be our staff members, Fidel, Colin, and Divya. I don't have their contact info up here, but you can always submit your, let us know you want to get in contact with your regional liaison, and I'm on the other end of that email. I will send you directly to them. But for this area, and again, if you're coming from Orange County, that's also Jose and Colin, and Imperial, that's Jose. Riverside area, that's actually me. And then San Bernardino, that's one of our staff members, John Buechner. So now I'm going to go, now that I talked about LEAP, I'm going to go into a little bit details about the Prohousing Program. As I mentioned, the Prohousing Program came out of the 2019-2020 Budget Act, and it's a way to reward good actors for enacting policies that are pro-housing, that are good for your community and good for development to occur in your community. Again, HCD right now, they're working on developing emergency regulations, which are going to set forth the process for which a city can gain that designation, that label, essentially. The incentive for applying and gaining that designation is that once a local government receives a pro-housing designation, they can receive additional incentives and bonus points for being a pro-housing locality. One example is becoming more competitive for different types of funding programs that are competitive, such as HSC, so that's Affordable Housing and Sustainability Communities Program, TCC, and IIG. And that's just you being able to gain extra points on those competitive funding programs so you too can be more competitive to get that funding. So some categories of what a pro-housing policy is. There's about 4 big categories. The 4 big categories include having favorable zoning, which is category number 1, decreasing timeframes to approve permits, reducing construction and development costs, and providing financial subsidies. So these are 4 big buckets that have specific policies that will then fall under. So policies on how to implement favorable zoning, policies and strategies on how to decrease timeframes and to approve permits more quicker. So these are the 4 big buckets. And again, like I said, those regulations are coming out in the next month or so, and they will include the very detailed within each bucket, what kind of policies are we specifically looking for. But some general examples of what a pro-housing policy could be: allowing residential and mixed uses by right, so that could fall under that favorable zoning. Zoning more sites for residential or increasing densities, again, could fall under that favorable zoning category. Allowing for parking reductions, limiting number of public hearings to 3 or less, that could fall under decreasing the timeframes to process an application. Adopting an ADU ordinance that kind of reduces the barriers to develop ADUs. Creating objective design and development standards, that could fall under a couple categories, and establishing a local housing trust fund. That could fall under that category number 4, which is providing financial subsidies. Again, just examples. There's a long list that will be available in the regulations. There's also a framework paper that kind of sets forth the same framework I'm talking about, but it may be able to provide you more info in detail. Again, if you want that, I'm happy to share it after this presentation. So really quickly on the regional early action planning grants. Again, this is a grant program that goes directly to regional council of governments and regional entities. So in this case, the funding will go directly to SCAG, just like you guys have your local early action planning grants, regional entities have their the regional early action planning grant program. There was $118 million available for this program. Again, it's an over-the-counter process, non-competitive. The grant amounts were determined within statute, and the eligible activities that your regional COG or your entity, so in this case SCAG, can use the funding for is developing technical assistance programs, providing technical assistance, administering the funds, sub-allocating to local governments and other sub-regional entities, and or improving the ARENA methodology. So some possible ideas, just throwing it out there. This is available with LEAP and SB2, could be available for REAP. Again, that funding is going directly to your COG, but you can actually layer these funding sources. So if you are familiar with SB2 and you are familiar with LEAP and you're even familiar with REAP, you can actually layer your funding sources for a couple ways. So the examples I've seen is that somebody got an SB2 project, they got approved, but now they see that they have more or additional funding through LEAP. They want to add that funding back into their project to further enhance that project. Oh, I have more funding? Okay, I'm gonna, with the same project, I want to do A, B, and C now. Another option is that the LEAP funding can cover a certain part of a project and the SB2 can cover another part. We've seen scenarios where, an applicant applied for SB2 for $160,000. They hope that that was going to cover the cost of one or two of their projects. They're starting to see that they're coming out short. They put out RFPs and the bids came much higher, and they need more funding to supplement those projects. You can use LEAP to do that as well. Or you could just use LEAP to do a whole new or another project that you're thinking of. So now I'm going to go into the technical assistance portion of this presentation. This is really where we kind of let you know what programs we have to help you not just apply for this grant funding, but implement this grant funding and implement different policies. If you're thinking about updating that ADU ordinance, or you want to do the rezoning to increase densities, or just increase residential capacity, this TA program that I'm going to go over can hopefully help you kind of get there in the next couple years. So usually I call this the HCD Technical Assistance Program on Accelerating Housing Production. It's just the catch-all for all the topics, all the areas that we might all be running into as local governments. I like to use the title again because it's a catch-all. However, the formal title is called the SB2 Planning Grants Program, Technical Assistance Program. So this program came from funding from the SB2, the statute. The statute allocated 5% to creating a TA program, and this is that program. So the SB2 program had two phases. Here you can see phase 1 was direct assistance to applicants. So again, direct assistance in helping you all apply for the planning grants. We did that in 2019 to 2020. Our goal was to ensure all cities and counties can access this funding source. We provided direct TA to all cities and counties to apply for SB2 planning grants. I believe the number at the end of the day was about 400 jurisdictions. We provided direct assistance, identifying eligible activities, draft applications, running into issues about your resolution. That was the goal of the phase 1. Now that that program is kind of, everyone's gotten their funding, or at least they're about to be under contract for their funding, we're going into phase 2. Now phase 2 is called the Ongoing Regionally Tailored TA Program. Now this is going to be running from 2020 to 2022. And the goal here is we want to regionally customize a set of TA resources that are going to address the unique needs within each region or sub-region. So that includes, what I mean by that is providing you toolkits, web-based tools, fact sheets, training, other resources that are going to help support your jurisdictions in housing planning to accelerate housing production. So you're probably wondering, that sounds pretty cool. I have a couple ideas about what toolkits I could use or what resources I need other than just funding to kind of accelerate housing production. So how are you going to do that, Sohab? How are you going to ask me what I need? So, well, first of all, I'm going to clarify something because everyone gets this confused. The LEAP TA program that I just mentioned, where you contact your LEAP TA regional liaison, hey, I need help applying. The SB2 TA program, which I'm about to go over on how you can get your toolkits, two separate programs. Goal is the same, accelerate housing production, but they're operated in two separate ways. The LEAP TA program is an in-house program we have our staff working on. The SB2 Planning Grants program is ran by HCD, but we also contracted with the company PlaceWorks. Many of you might be familiar, if you're familiar with SB2, if you receive direct assistance through that program. We contracted with them, and they will be providing with us the ongoing technical assistance. So, phase one for the program was, again, providing direct assistance to over 400 jurisdictions on their applications. Again, over 450 SB2 applications. That was roughly 90% of the state. I always like to use this collage because it just shows we did about 20 to 25 workshops throughout the state, everywhere from up north to down south to the eastern Sierra Mountains, down all the way to the west. So, and their TA services again include helping reviewing draft apps, brainstorming, providing feedback, and all of those sorts. Now you're wondering, I still want to know how I'm going to get my toolkit and how you're going to help me ongoing for the next 2 years. So our approach for the phase 2 of the SB2 TA program is going to be a bottoms-up approach. If you look down here at the bottom, our first step is we're going to be doing regional outreach and engagement with all of either a region or a sub-region throughout the state. So you're SCAG for most of you, and SCAG is way too big to create one TA program for. So our approach is going to be outreaching with each of the sub-regional entities to get to the jurisdictions within that entity and to gain an idea of what are your regional priorities. What do you need? What are you struggling with, and what kind of resources can we provide you for the next 2 years to accelerate housing production? So we'll do this regional outreach. Again, in your case, it's going to be a sub-regional level. We are working with your sub-regional entities right now to send out surveys to their jurisdictions on getting an idea of what are your needs. Then we're going to format all of that into a regional TA plan. That regional TA plan is going to be your TA plan as a region or sub-region in this case. That's going to include your priorities, what services you requested, what you need, and what toolkits you're looking for in the next couple years. And then from the regional TA plan, once we've had that finalized and we're ready to go, we're going to be deploying the tools, and resources that you've asked for to address housing planning in your community. So you're wondering, okay, great, regional TA plan. When are you going to contact me about that? Again, we're working with all of your sub-regional entities, so that's OC-COG, San Bernardino, Imperial County, Coachella Valley, working with them to find a way to get the survey out to all of their jurisdictions. And then you'll fill out the survey kind of saying what are your top toolkits you would like to see, what are top training programs you would like, what kind of issues are you facing, how can we help you in the next 2 years. That survey will go out again in the next month or two, and then it will feed into a regional TA plan. And then by the end of summer, hopefully we can start deploying those resources to all of you. So what does a regional TA plan look like? I will say you might hear us say RTAP sometimes. That's my boss's acronym for this, regional TA plan, so he calls it an RTAP. But a regional TA plan, an example is, this is just ABAG. This isn't their actual plan. I just put that there. Sorry, ABAG, if you're on the call, it's not real. But it could be. The idea is that the region or the sub-region in this case, so let's take CBAG, will sit in the middle. And again, it could be toolkits. Jurisdictions identify that they want toolkits on 1 or 2 issue areas. It could be, and of course it's going to include their regional priorities. Housing element TAs. I can really use TA on housing elements because I'm particularly struggling with this area of the housing element. Consulting benches. I cannot have 20 jurisdictions subcontract with 20 different consultants. Maybe it's a pre-approved consulting bench. Web-based zoning tools. It might be very helpful to have a regional web-based zoning tool. Training. Building support for housing. We hear a lot about sometimes, the staff and the jurisdiction try to get housing and the certain zoning in place to allow for housing to occur, but sometimes the public is not always in favor, and that's a big uphill battle. So having training and maybe even public campaigns around building support for housing in your community. So again, this is just what it could look like. It is up to all of you as jurisdictions and as subregions to determine what is it that you need and how can we help you. It's fully paid for. It's a free TA program, paid for by the state. So think about, as we start working on that survey and that outreach with all of you, think about what is it that you could use. This right here is an example of what we could do. Regionally customized toolkits, model ordinances, housing workshops, again, consulting benches, help around housing elements, public engagement, toolkits on a variety of issue areas, a clearinghouse for best practices, and I will tell you some of this we are actually working on already at the statewide level, both at the statewide level, just to have to all of you, and through SCAG to also have some regional base, which Kevin can speak on in just a bit, about, and in addition to those tools, at the statewide level and at SCAG's level, we will be coming down, like I mentioned, at a sub-regional level to even get you more tools. So this is what we are doing at a statewide level. I know there's a lot on here, it's a flyer. So again, I'm happy to send it out after this presentation. But right now at the statewide level, these are the tools that we are working on that we are hoping to get to every jurisdiction. A housing portal where you can access ordinances, toolkits, everything in just one spot instead of digging through HCD's website for different things. Ordinance templates. Maybe you're always updating your reasonable accommodation ordinance or your special needs population ordinance or ordinance on ADUs. Now we want to create templates where you can kind of just pull it off the shelf, customize it for your jurisdiction, and send it through, probably saving you hopefully thousands of dollars and making it kind of a state-approved template. So you know that you're meeting state laws as well. Land inventory samples, how to pick the right sites to meet your 6-cycle RENA. CEQA site check. This is going to be a web-based tool where you can put in an address or a parcel number and get an idea of what are all the CEQA exemptions for that parcel. That tool is actually being created in conjunction with OPR, Office of Planning and Research. Objective Standards How-To Guide. That's a toolkit we're also working on right now. It's basically a how-to on how to actually create objective design standards, because that can be really tough sometimes. ADU web map and toolkit, and then this is the back page, just kind of again explaining. This is just statewide toolkits we're going to do regardless. Again, like I mentioned, we're going to come down at a sub-regional level to get even more feedback on what else we can provide you. Last resource I'm going to show you. This is a peer-to-peer, actually, already have it open. So this is a map. Kevin, can you see the map? Just make sure. Okay, cool. Okay. So this is a planning grants and local housing strategies map. We created this map. It's on it's on HCD's website. But basically, you can actually, for the planning grants program, you can access just about everyone's application. We're still working on uploading everyone's application, but this is the map that you can do to access that. Also, if you're looking for specific projects, so I'll walk you through this. So I'm applying for LEAP. I'm looking for some sample language on how to fill out the application for, I want to update my general plan, or pieces of my general plan. Well, since LEAP and SB2 are really similar, and the application actually looks exactly like, minus the fact that it says LEAP, you can use similar project applications from SB2 into LEAP. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to turn on this filter. I'm going to filter for, oh look, general plan updates with a focus on housing. I'm going to filter, turn off the did not apply filter because you're not going to get anything for those jurisdictions. So it's telling me right now there's 24 jurisdictions that have been inputted in this map that applied to update parts of their general plan with a focus on housing. So now I am just like, that is fantastic. Can I see a sample application? So can I get an idea of what that looks like? So I'm going to click on Delano. Delano, Central Valley, San Joaquin Valley, they were awarded $160,000 for that filter, so that the general plan update. I can see what they applied for, general plan update with a focus on housing. I can get their project description, general plan update, that includes public workshops and one-stop processing system. I can see their anticipated outcomes, what they're hoping to gain from that project when they're done implementing. And I can click on this right here, and their application is going to pop up for me. Now, I can take a look at Delano's project description and get a good idea of what HCD is looking for, or even just some language you can use rather than recreating an application for that kind of particular project. So when you're applying for LEAP right now, especially if you just found out and you're about to dive into it, start by looking at this map. We haven't uploaded all 494 applications. That's a lot of applications to upload. We are working on it, but if you see a particular project area or a particular jurisdiction, or say, hey, I'm looking for an application around ADUs, feel free to email me and I can put it up on the map for you. So I'm gonna play with this just a little bit to give you guys a good idea of how to use it. So now I'm gonna look for, I wanna see examples of how an application looks like for a housing element update. So I turned on that filter, I filtered for right here, housing element update. Oops, gonna close that. Looks like about 69 jurisdictions. Probably there's a lot more. Again, I'm still working on updating these maps. I'm going to click on this green dot. Looks like it's in the Eastern Sierra, Alpine County. Funds awarded $160,000. I can see what they applied for. Project description, prepare and adopt a 6-cycle housing element. Oh, they're also going to be revising zoning for commercial zones, a new mobile home overlay zone, and some CEQA. I can see their outcomes, and I can click on their application. Again, if you don't see an application, but you would like to see one up here, I'm still working on updating the entire mapping system for all 494 cities, but just feel free to email me and let me know and I can put it up there. So Alpine, I can see their project timeline. Okay, I see what HCD is looking for, looks pretty clean. And really, again, so you don't have to start from scratch. There's a lot of examples we can pull for you, so you're not spending too much time, hopefully, on these applications. Okay, one more, promise. I'm going to look for a project around ADUs. Close that. 152 jurisdictions awarded for a project around ADUs. I'm going to look, let's see. Okay, so now I want to see what an application can look like. So Temecula. $310,000. Update the city's development code to establish permit-ready ADU program. Also update the housing element and a water quality management plan. Great. Looks like I want to take a look. So it's going to open up, and then it gives me Temecula's application. So just a resource. A couple reasons why we created this. One is not just so you can pull applications, but you can see what your neighbors are doing, what your region is doing, what other people in different parts of the state are doing. It's a way to pull best practices. If you're working on a project and maybe you're struggling or you want to learn kind of lessons learned, you can look at this map and see what other people are doing. And the goal is to kind of create that peer-to-peer learning environment. See what everyone's doing, see maybe learn some best practices from them. Again, we work on updating this map as frequently as possible. Also has some cool other tabs I'll go through quickly. We have a tab here on grant funding. That was for the SB2 program. We'll also have it for LEAP. This is grant funding by region. So if you were awarded funding or you requested, it shows you by region how each region did and how much was kind of left on the table, how much actual money. This is, again, us trying to be very transparent with the public, with legislators, with local governments, with advocates on how did this program go and how will the future plan grant programs go. You can see TA meetings that we had through the SB2 program. Just, again, it shows you kind of how much services we did provide through these TA programs. This tab, Technical Assistance Under Construction, is going to include every region's TA plans. So then you're going to be able to see not only what your region might want to work on, but what other regions are planning to work on. And one more cool tab, this is also kind of under construction, but in the future, maybe in the next couple months, I hope it's something that you can all turn to. This is where you can really see some best practices. So let's say you want to create an ADU prototype kind of program. So I will go right here. I'm going to say, oh, pre-approved plans. Let's see what cities are working on pre-approved plans. I turn that filter on right here. I'm going to turn, or I can also just turn these off, these buttons, except for the ADU button, because I want to see what's going on in the ADU world. Again, like I said, this one is still kind of under construction because I doubt there's only 7 jurisdictions in the state working on ADUs. I know there's hundreds working on it right now, but just to give you an idea. Okay, let's see. Who is this? Clovis, jurisdiction name. Clovis, oops. Oh, I see they're working on pre-approved plans. Looks like there's a link. And the goal is you can go now directly to Clovis's website and see what it is that they're working on and how can you learn from them and see, kind of take from ideas and then incorporate it into some of the work you're doing. So this is what we call just the local housing strategies. It doesn't really have to do so much with planning grants, but just planning in general. You know, you're working on so many different things and you want to pull best practices, you want to see examples. Not only are we going to have the toolkits available, but we want to also have available what your neighbors are doing, what other regions are doing, so you can kind of learn from and see if you can pull anything from there. So that is the map. Again, I will send a direct link. You can also go on HCD's website to access it. So that is the conclusion of my presentation. Hopefully nobody fell asleep, but if you did, I understand. It's okay. For more information on the LEAP program, you can contact us directly. I'm on the other side of that email, earlyactionplanning@hcd.ca.gov. If you're looking for a regional representative, TA services, anything of that sort, just send an email and I can put you to the right person, or I myself can help you. The Prohousing Program, if you're really curious about what that's looking like or what it's going to, you can email our team at prohousingpolicies@hcd.ca.gov. And for this technical assistance program, so mapping, the toolkits I talked about, the flyer I showed, you can email me directly at my email address, sohab.mehmood@hcd.ca.gov. And I'm going to hand it over to Kevin now if he wants to chime in.
Thanks, Sohab. I appreciate it. You know, we've got about 12 minutes left or so, and I don't want to take too much time from discussion other than to very briefly mention SCAG has some technical assistance programs running through this as well, mostly on the data side, some data to help with some of the required jurisdiction level type of information, a little bit to help local jurisdictions kind of figure out a reasonable capacity and price level for ADUs for future planning. And opening up some of the parcel level land use data that we do already have available on our open data portal with some additional attributes and stuff like that to kind of help. So I do see a few questions in the chat up here, and I see at least 3 past SCAG presidents on the participant list too. So if you want to either chime in or through the chat, maybe Sohab, if you can answer a couple of those, and I'll keep an eye on if you put your raise hand function or want to take this time to kind of engage.
That works perfectly. I don't see any raised hands, do you?
I don't.
Was my presentation just that thorough? No way.
We do have a couple of questions here in the chat that I can read out for you. Can you use the funds? I'm not sure exactly which one's referring to. Could be any perhaps for data, for analysis, things like building outlines or aerial imagery data.
So you can use part of the funds for that. Again, the whole goal with this program and what it has to lead to is the adoption of a planning document or the implementation of some type of process improvement. So you want to kind of work in those realms. I'm happy to talk offline on how we can brainstorm to get your project to that kind of line.
And one other question, we've already started the housing element update process. What does coming soon mean?
Probably for the toolkits, I'm assuming. So for the housing element toolkits, I think what coming soon just meant was that It can help you with identifying sites. Maybe it could be kind of a QC to make sure that you've gotten your housing element kind of in accordance to state law. Housing element TA is what we're still brainstorming, and what we'll be working with all subregions on is maybe that's helping you actually go out and pick sites, you know, and start filtering to see what sites not only meet state law, but are good and right for development. So coming soon, it's what we probably are talking about is July, August to really see these resources. But if there's something specific you're looking for around housing element TA, feel free to email me and I can try to find some resources to help you.
And we've still got about 90 folks in here with no hands raised. So it's been a great presentation for sure. But I think, we can open this up to any broader discussion. I think there's a lot of nice linkage here with the earlier panel as well. I know Professor Painter had mentioned, some of the kind of systems changes needed to alleviate the homelessness situation, in addition to some of what Dowell and Jung Ho had brought up as far as overcrowding, cost burdenness, these other factors are concerned. Certainly one piece of the puzzle is the planning and zoning that we're discussing here, but there are some kind of broader systemic pieces of the puzzle using that to catalyze housing finance. I know Dowell and I have discussed the, it's a lot of money for planning, but not necessarily for housing itself. I think Patrick, I think you're from Lakewood, as I recall. You've got a question?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Hey, are the links, is the PowerPoint or the links going to be available offline?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to make, Kevin, I'll work with you to send out the PowerPoint, also all those flyers and the link to access the mappings. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to take notes, but it'd be good to get the source.
Yes, absolutely. And also, just to Kevin's point, if you guys have any feedback about, the mapping tools that I kind of presented, if there's something you would like to see, if you think it's helpful, feel free to provide that feedback. Something I was thinking about with this mapping tool as we create it and we continually try to update it and design it, I try to think about what would somebody want to see 1, 2, 3 years from now when these planning grants are really hitting the ground. We were thinking about a way to show how everyone's doing in the status of their projects, how much progress they're making with their projects. That's one option. We want to make sure that this is available for data too. If you want to have the raw data that's powering these maps, that's absolutely available. You can even access it on the link itself. So happy to take kind of, any feedback or any comments via email on what you would like to see in this tool, or if there's something that might be helpful.
Okay, very good.
I think we've got Margaret Finley from City of Duarte with her hand raised.
Thank you, Kevin. Sohab, absolutely fantastic presentation. You mentioned that, and I love the map, where you can go ahead and click on the city and find out all this information. I think you said that it was going to be a little bit before you would get all the applications up there. What kind of time frame are we looking at for that?
So my time frame I've actually set for myself is to work on it and have it done by end of next week at most. I'll be working through the weekend to get majority of it updated. I can actually even send out a cheat list of okay, so for this project category, here are the 15 cities that are already up there. So you don't have to click on each dot to see if something's there. So I can even send you guys with Kevin a cheat list on what's there, and then you can just quickly go directly to that jurisdiction and click on it. I do hope to get all 494 up there by end of next week. That is the goal, and we are working on that as we speak. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. That is good information, and truly, I think you're telling us then that this COVID situation is where we stay at home and don't work. You're really at home and you are working. So thank you very much.
Oh, why, thank you. I appreciate
we
that.
We all are.
Well, we got to get
I'm sitting here approving ADUs while you're talking. So
we got to get these LEAP applications in. We have 2 weeks left. We want to help you all get across that finish line. That's money for all of you sitting around. So we don't want to leave any money on the table. So that means we're also working with you.
I don't see any other hands raised, but I do see an interesting entry into the chat here from Axel Olson. I believe it's from ABAG. Also mentions Dowell. in there related to multifamily housing. I don't know if either of you wanted to bring that up.
What's the question about multifamily?
Axel, I think you did you? Well, I can read Axel's second question in there. Has the state heard from or plans to survey developers about what they see as some of the key bottlenecks?
So if you guys are familiar with the SB2 planning grants program, there were, and if you're really like in the nitty gritty of it, there were what we created priority policy areas. These were 5 big buckets of pre-approved activities. The reason why those were, the way those were created is actually we surveyed developers, local developers, builders, and planners, and advocacy groups on really statewide, what are those key areas that you see around planning? So those 5 areas that were identified in the SB2 planning grants program, you can also see it on the map. It's called PPA 1, PPA 2, PPA 3. But really, I don't know if I can recall those categories, but one of the biggest ones was the suggestion from builders and developers to rezone to allow for by right development. So we consider that as a pre-approved activity, because that was a common thing that developers mentioned as a bottleneck, and a way to solve that is through rezoning for by right activity. A second one was just the processing. A lot of developers mentioned, for some smaller jurisdictions or any type of jurisdictions, they didn't have very sophisticated or permit tracking systems at all. So it made it very hard, and it lengthened the process to kind of to approve a permit. And so a lot of applications for SB2 actually came for permit tracking systems. And that followed under the PPA, I think it was like number 5, expedited permitting process. Another category we saw was around infrastructure. While these planning grants don't fund the actual infrastructure, it can help fund the planning of that infrastructure, help with infrastructure analysis, help determine what infrastructure is needed and how that can be developed over the coming years. So that was another common one we heard from developers and builders as far as local government control. PPA number 2, which was objective design and development standards. Builders, developers, they said it's really difficult sometimes to reconcile zoning codes and expectations from the local government. What do they want to see in design? And they're going back and forth all the time about a project on their design and the development standards. And rather, they would prefer just some clear instruction on what are the design standards, a checklist almost. What are the guidelines? They can mark off a checklist and go through the process. So we saw a lot of applications on creating those objective standards. And I think SB 35 kind of try to touch at that a little bit as well.
Any other questions, insights, comments, thoughts, etc.?
I have a comment. I just dropped in here. Sohab, it was really excellent with what I saw. I've been at the other workshop tables also. Excuse me. I feel like, I just dropped into the 21st century. I mean, I haven't been paying attention.
Yeah.
So things may have evolved over the last 5 years or so, but wow, this looks a little different than when I slogged through it really in the early 2000s.
Oh, okay.
Which is the 21st century, but not really. This is 21st century now. Mm-hmm. So that's all. Only comment.
I think we've got one more question from the chat from Jennifer. Sohab, I don't know if you can see that one or not.
Yes. So the question is a site plan permit, if a site plan permit is required, but not a CUP, is a development project considered by right? So I want to follow up on that before I give you an answer, just because the whole group is listening. But I can definitely look into that and get you an answer back, Jennifer. Happy to do that. Also, now that I read that, I want to let you guys know, if you haven't got the notification, especially all of you, I'm sure you're thinking about your housing elements. We just came out just today. We just released it, a housing element sites inventory guidebook. It's about 40 pages. It includes all the new laws on sites on the sites that are applicable for your housing elements and how to meet your RENA, and it includes kind of suggestions on tips on how to use non-vacant sites versus vacant sites versus small sites, large sites, all of that sort. It just came out this morning. Again, I'm happy to share it through Kevin, and then Kevin maybe can send it out to the group as well.
One suggestion that I'd put on that, Sohab, is we will be sending out all of the links to all the slides after the workshop. I can't recall, I apologize if it's after part 2, or we may be able to post some after this part 1 today. But I would suggest if that's okay to stick our SCAG technical assistance and then that guidebook you mentioned into kind of the back end of your slides, if that's all right.
I'm just going to write down all the things I promised to send out afterwards because I feel like I mentioned a lot.
Well, we're about at time right now, but I just want to thank everyone for participating in Sohab for the great discussion here.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for joining this presentation.
Thank
Don't
you.
forget part 2 of the demographic workshop next Thursday.